Hey guys, what's up? So, I see the same questions in the Mage Discord almost every day. So, I wanted to make a quick video about what you need to prepare for raiding and endgame content in 9.0 Shadowlands as a Frost Mage. What? Okay, stop laughing. I can hear you laughing. Okay, no. But in all seriousness, I wanted to make this video a few weeks ago before Castle Nathria actually released because obviously all the sims, all the predictions, everything we had going into this first raid tier of Shadowlands suggested that Frost was going to be the best spec for this raid tier. And even a lot of the world first raiders were planning on going Frost. And, well, I guess that's the silver lining of, doing this video a couple weeks later after it's been out for, I think, 3 weeks now, is obviously we've got a lot of data, players have gotten in there and I mean, basically, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Frost is not doing so well. It's not. It's not like even the worst mage spec. It's actually among the lowest specs in the game right now. Um, but the one thing I see in the Mage Discord, Frost channel every single day is lots of folks saying, you know what, screw it. I like playing Frost. I'm gonna stick with playing Frost, even if it's not great right now. And I'm gonna practice and be the best Frost Mage that I can be. And when we get a buff, or even if that's in the next tier, whenever that happens, I'll be better. And so I know that there's a lot of other die-hard kind of Frost stalwarts out there, like myself. I've been playing Frost for 16 years now, and if I'm being honest, even I am switching over to Fire for Mythic progression this tier. But I'm probably going to play Frost on reclears, and basically, there's not a whole lot of Frost mages left from that initial gung ho push for this raid tier. So I feel like someone has to, continue making content for the few Frost mages that are left out there that are really sticking with it. So if that's you, guys, this video is for you. So first up, let's talk about talents. So recently I was watching one of the Warlock YouTube personalities, Kalamazi, right before Castle Nathria came out, talking about these are the talents that I think you're going to use on this boss, and then on this boss we're going to use these talents. And I love his content. I got nothing but mad love for Warlocks, but I really don't envy them being in a position like that where they have to change talents like almost every boss. Frostmage has historically almost never been like that, and that's true in 9.0 as well. Honestly, for most endgame content, including the raid, this talent loadout right here, this is going to be your money, man. You are almost never going to have to change talents from this. There are a couple of options you can tweak in here at pretty much on the level 30 tier. But for the most part, you can set which one you want before you go into the raid, and you don't really have to change between each boss because it's not that big a deal. So, like I said, really the only thing that you're going to change among this talent setup is going to be on the level 30 tier. So, I'm kind of going to go over the other talent rows first and talk about those a little bit because those are mostly almost never going to change. And then I'll come back to the 30 tier. So, at 15, you're absolutely going to take Lonely Winter for rating and for Mythic Plus. Period. So Bone Chilling definitely saw some play in 8.3 in BFA, but that was because we were playing no Ice Lance Glacial Spike build, and Lonely Winters does not affect Glacial Spike's damage. You definitely can still use Bone Chilling when you're solo. I love to use it in Torghast because it gives you extra control, and for a Frost Mage, that means extra damage as well. But for all endgame content, raids, Mythic Plus, Lonely Winter. Honestly, this tier is your choice between Shimmer and Ice Flows to improve your mobility. Most people use Shimmer. I use Shimmer. But I've definitely talked to several folks who prefer Ice Flows. That's up to you. 35, Chain Reaction. period. The other options are not even remotely close because Ice Lance is such a huge portion of our damage. This almost never falls off because of how frequently we're Ice Lancing. But even if it does, if you reapply one stack, even like one stack of this is still better than the other two options. This tier is your choice. You can definitely use Ring of Frost in Mythic Plus if you want. I've definitely seen a lot of people ask, hey, is Freezing Rain good in Mythic Plus with the Glacial Fragments legendary? And short answer is no, it's really not. Because with Splitting Ice, it splits your Ice Lance into two, and each of those two Ice Lances procs its own Glacial Fragments. So essentially, you're never really changing off Splitting Ice. It is such a phenomenal talent. It buffs the damage of your main Ice Lance if you're only hitting one target. It cleaves onto a second target. There's no equal here. And last but not least, Ray of Frost is a total meme and has been for several expansions now. And it feels like they really don't want us to play Glacial Spike again, especially after the end of BFA, because they adjusted a lot of things with the playstyle and the mastery and the Azerite traits are gone. Glacial Spike was really only propped up by Azerite traits and corruption, and those are gone now. So Thermal Void is the play here. Now, on the 30 tier, like I said, you do have a choice. The absolute best option for DPS here is going to be Focus Magic. But the caveat to that is only if you have two Frost Mages in your raid who are trading Focus Magic back and forth between each other. Because, yes, that absolutely is 10% crit for each of them. However, because Frost is doing so poorly right now, I think the chances of you having two Frost Mages in your raid is lower than ever. Personally, if you ask me, I do kind of think that skews the numbers we're seeing from, the balance of specs a little bit. But it is what it is. If you have two Frost Mages that can trade Focus Magic, this is by far the highest damage output option you have here. If not, Rune of Power is your next best option. However, there is a case to be made, and I'm going to look at kind of the top 100 logs, parses from each fight in Castle Nathria here in a little bit. And you'll definitely see there's plenty of them using Incanter's Flow. So there's a case to be made for using Incanter's Flow on fights where, you put down a Rune of Power and some mechanic comes out and you have to run from your Rune of Power and you have to abandon it. And you don't really have a choice. So you basically wasted this talent tier. Whereas Incanter's Flow is going to keep ticking on your character. And theoretically, you'll get more damage out of that if you have to run away from your Rune of Power. So Incanter's Flow, like for me, only sims, honestly, like 10 DPS lower. So that's really close. So absolutely, on a fight where you're going to be moving around a lot, you probably can use Incanter's Flow. And I mean, I've even seen logs on like Sludge Fist Heroic where people are using Incanter's Flow and they're like 10th, I think. Somewhere between 10th and 15th highest Frost Parse. So, don't rule it out. If there's a lot of movement on the fight, you can definitely make the case for Incanter's Flow. If you feel really confident with the fight and knowing when you're going to have to move and kind of when you have safe periods where you can drop your Rune is going to be better. And again, if you don't have someone to trade Focus Magic with, I would not take Focus Magic. Next up, we're going to talk about Enchants and Gems. Now, the first thing I have to say for Gems, Enchants, gear in general, is go sim your character on raidbots.com. Please don't ask somebody, even in the Mage Discord, like they're super helpful in there. I'm in there all the time. Like, don't ask, what is my stat priority? I want this stat first, then this stat second. It does not work like that anymore. It has not worked like that in a long time. For instance, crit is very valuable for Frost Mage, but the more crit you get, the more valuable haste gets and versatility gets. And mastery is not good for us anymore, but even mastery even gets more valuable. if you've been around for a while, you've probably heard the advice that you should aim for 33% crit chance first because of Shatter, which 33% crit chance plus Shatter will give your Ice Lances a 100% chance to crit. If you have heard this advice, if you are working off of this advice for gearing your character, please stop, throw it out, get rid of that advice, back to the drawing board. And the drawing board is simming your character on raidbots.com. In the future, I'm going to put out a video on how to do this. But if you need some help with that, please hit me up on the Mage Discord, hit me up in the comments below, on my Discord, wherever, and I will show you how to do this properly. That is old advice, outdated. Please don't. Okay, so for enchants. On weapon, you really have two options. I'm using Sinful Revelation, which is the best single target enchant for weapon. There's also Celestial Guidance, which A, is a lot cheaper, and B, as soon as you start attacking multiple targets, Celestial Guidance actually becomes better. In fact, I'm probably going to switch over to it soon. But those are essentially your two options, Sinful Revelation and Celestial Guidance. Sinful Revelation is going to be best for pure single target. Celestial Guidance is better for multiple targets. Next up is your bracers, and you are going to want plus 15 Intellect on your bracers, which is called Eternal Intellect on the auction house. Next up is your chest. So there's two options here, Eternal Stats and Eternal Insight. Eternal Insight actually has a little bit less stats, but it also has a damage proc. So whenever you hit with your spells, you have a chance to, deal damage. And that proc actually comes out to quite a bit of damage. So I'm going to recommend Eternal Insight here. Next up, I don't have this cloak enchanted, but on your cloak, you're going to have choices of either 30 stamina, or you have three options, I believe. 20 stam plus leech, 20 stam plus avoidance, or 20 stam plus speed. And the choice is really up to you. If you want to run a little faster, take the speed one. If you want to avoid a little more damage, the avoidance one is somewhat useful. And if you want to help your healers out over the period of a long fight, the leech is useful. I personally prefer 30 stamina. I've had it save my life as recently as last night's raid on Heroic Council of Blood. I think I had like 1 HP left, and if I didn't have that enchant, I would have died. But that ended up being the kill, so I prefer having a little bit more stam. Next up is going to be your rings, and this is where I say sim your character. Your ring enchants and your gems are probably going to fluctuate between crit or haste, depending on how much you have of each. And so, pretty much every time you get an upgrade, you're going to want to go do that again. Sim top gear on raidbots.com. And you might have just recently gained a lot of haste, and now it's going to tell you that crit is better. And if you've been stacking crit, it's probably going to tell you that haste is better. And like I said, this fluctuates all the time. Every single upgrade you get, depending on how much you have of any stat, changes how much all the other stats are worth. From most of the mages that I've talked to and most of the sims that I've done on myself, I think you're probably going to see crit or haste be the most frequently used ring enchants. And it's called Tenet, Tenet, of Critical Strike or of Haste. And that's pretty much it for enchants. And gems kind of follow the same logic. Sim it. Next up is consumables. So any good raider needs to be loaded up with consumables, and this expansion is definitely no exception. In fact, there's more consumables you have to keep track of in this expansion than in most expansions that I can remember, at least in recent memory. So first, obviously, you've got flasks. The nice thing is there's only one flask now. You don't have an int flask and a strength flask and an agility flask. You just have one spectral flask of power. plus 70 primary stat, period. Next up, food. Here you can see I'm using haste food. If your raid has them available, the best option is usually going to be primary stat feasts. However, if you don't, it's always nice to keep your own food on hand. But in Shadowlands, that's going to be secondary stat food. Here you see I'm using haste food. I would recommend probably having some haste food and crit food. Now you can see the haste food here is Tenebrous Crown, Roast, Aspic. I apologize, I don't have the name of the crit food on hand. But next up, Veiled Augment runes. Pretty simple. Plus 18 main stat. And these are consumed every time you die. So you probably need a lot of these. And these can be expensive, and honestly, they offer the least benefit of all the consumables you have available to you. So, if you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have hundreds of thousands of gold to blow on raid consumables every night, this would probably be the one I'd skimp on until you are very close to downing the boss. Like, until you're making serious progress, I would start using these. Next up is Shadowcore Oil. And this is one you're going to want to have on all the time, period. So it actually functions as a separate, a second weapon enchant. So obviously you see I have Sinful Revelation, permanent weapon enchant, and this functions as a second temporary weapon enchant. And basically it's just a damage proc. And this lasts 1 hour. It's actually kind of like a flask. But the cool thing about this that you'll see when I talk about potions is that certain potions have an added effect if your weapon is enchanted with Shadowcore Oil. So this is definitely something you're going to want to use. Next up, Heavy Desolate Armor Kit. Real simple, lasts 2 hours. Again, this persists through death, and it gives you 32 more stam if you put it on your chest. Last but not least, we have potions. Now, there's really 2 options here. Technically, there's 3 options. There's Potion of Deathly Fixation, Potion of Phantom Fire, which you can see right here. And you'll notice, if you consume this potion while your weapon is augmented with Shadowcore Oil, it deals additional damage. And last but not least is Spectral Intellect. So, I use both of these. Technically, for pure single target, the highest damage output is going to be Phantom Fire. However, it's not by much. It's close. Spectral Intellect is slightly behind on pure single target. However, kind of like we were talking about with Celestial Guidance, Spectral Intellect begins to pull ahead as soon as you're attacking more than one target. So, again, if you don't have the money to blow on, keeping several stacks of both of these potions available, just get Spectral Intellect. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Legendaries. Now, unfortunately, Frost Mage is in a place in 9.0 where you really need 2 Legendaries to be, and I hate to use this word right now, but competitive, because Frost is anything but competitive right now. But if you want to do the absolute best you can as a Frost Mage right now, you need 2 Legendaries. And those are Frostburn, which is otherwise referred to as Slick Ice, or Icebringer, which is otherwise known as Glacial Fragments. And rather than give you my opinion on which one of these is better on each boss in the raid and things like that, I'm just going to go to Warcraft logs and, kind of walk you through every fight and analyze what the top people playing Frostmage are doing. So Shriekwing is a purely single target fight, so obviously, that's going to be Slick Ice. If I may take a moment here, what I was talking about earlier with Incanter's Flow, you can see that the number 8 log on Heroic Shriekwing is using Incanter's Flow. So, in my opinion, if it can do that well, if it can be top 10, maybe there's some merit to using it, especially on a fight like that that has lots of movement. Um, Personally, I would lean towards Rune of Power on that fight, uh, because there's periods where you have to hide from the boss, and anytime where you're not going to be using the Rune of Power, there's plenty of time before the next discs come out, etc. Yeah, Incanter's Flow might gain some value there. Um, but anyway, like I said, you see that it's obviously as high as top 10. So, if that affects your decision on whether to use Rune or Incanter's Flow, by all means. It's not terrible. It's just not the absolute best. But Rune being the best requires a lot of pre-planning and RNG and not having to move out of mechanics. So anyway, back to Legendaries real quick. This one's, pretty obvious. 90% of people here are using Slick Ice. I don't even know how this Glacial Fragments guy is number 6, but, it is what it is. Huntsman is almost certainly going to be Glacial Fragments. Yeah, 82% of the top logs are using Glacial Fragments. There is a Slick Ice up there at like 7, but the vast majority of these are Glacial Fragments. Hungering Destroyer is a purely single target fight, so that's going to be almost entirely Slick Ice. Yeah, I don't even see a Glacial Fragments up here. Sun King Salvation is entirely an AoE fight. Yeah, every single top log on this fight is using Glacial Fragments, which is probably obvious if you've played around with either of them. Artificer, again, mostly single target fight. There's a little bit of cleave going on there if people get hit by like stasis traps and stuff like that, but if they're doing that, they're failing at mechanics. So no, Slick Ice here. Lady Darkvein, this it's not quite 50-50, but both legendaries are seeing some play here. In fact, there's Glacial Fragments up here at 3, and this is probably because there are additional adds in Heroic, and there's even more adds in Mythic. Although, if you can find a Mythic raid spot or a raid spot in a Mythic progression guild as Frost right now, more power to you. So, however, there's kind of few and far between ad phases. Like, there's more ads, but you probably only have to do 3, maybe 4 ad spawn waves tops throughout the whole fight, and they're pretty spaced out. So, if people are, nuking those ads pretty fast, I'd probably lean towards Slick Ice here. Council of Blood, this one's okay. So last time I looked, this was kind of more like 50-50, but I see it starting to skew a little bit more towards Slick Ice. I would imagine that the 3 out of 10 logs here using Glacial Fragments, like these guys, I could dive into these, but I would assume that a lot of that is going to be cleave damage on the waiters. Like they probably have a DK that's gripping in a bunch of the waiters that spawn at once and like a big AoE. But you can kill them in a certain order where you don't even have to worry about those. And all damage done to other targets, the other 2 members of the Council of Blood, as soon as one of them hits 0, the other 2 heal to full. So any damage you cleaved onto those guys is, nullified from your logs. So, Slick Ice. Sludge Fist, probably obvious. This is going to be Slick Ice. Yeah, 99%. Single target fight. Stone Legion Generals. This is actually... It's a single target fight, for the most part, up until Phase 3. But then it becomes a pretty AoE intensive fight. So, I would agree with, a lot of these top logs here using Glacial Fragments. I completely agree. It might seem lackluster until you get to the final phase, but once you do, you're going to be pumping. Last but not least, Castle Nathria. So this one's kind of 50-50. You'll see the top couple logs here are Slick Ice, but there's definitely some Glacial Fragments in here. In our first kill on normal, I haven't killed him on heroic yet, but we were initially having a lot of issues with the big wave of ads in phase 1. And so I was using Glacial Fragments to try and kill them quicker. And then as soon as we got our first clean push into phase two, we killed him. And the lesson learned there is there's really not as much ad cleave on this fight as pretty much everyone thought there would be going into this raid tier. Now that we've actually seen the fight, really that big ad wave that happened several times throughout phase one, that's it. There's the Kabbalist ads in phase two, but as arranged, you're usually going to be forced to attack the ones that are out on the platforms, and therefore you're not cleaving the boss. So there's actually very little ad cleave going on after phase one. So I'm going to recommend Sleek Eyes here. And last but not least, people ask, what stats do I want on my legendary, and what slots do I want to put my legendary on? And for Frost Mage, it's pretty simple. You want to use crit, haste, missives on both legendaries. And the nice thing about these two, it sucks that we have to have two legendaries, one for each use case, if you will. But the nice thing is that both of them can be put on pants. So we don't have to juggle, several different gear sets. We can just swap out our pants. So for both of these, Slick Ice, Glacial Fragments, I would recommend putting them on your pants. Now, if you ask the question of which one you should upgrade first, I think it depends. If you do a lot of Mythic Plus, you're going to want to upgrade Glacial Fragments first, period. If you occasionally do a couple Mythic Plus here and there, but you focus mostly on Raid, you could make a case for upgrading Slick Ice first. But overall, I think throughout all endgame content, Glacial Fragments has more overall use cases. It's going to see more play. I would upgrade Glacial Fragments first, and personally, I will be doing that. So that's about it, guys. If you are sticking with Frost, even through the dark times, you know what, man, I salute you. And I love this spec. I've been playing this spec for 16 years now, and even if I am going to play Fire for progression, I want to keep supporting the Frost Mage community and making you guys quality content. So if you like this, or if there's any other questions you have, any other content you'd like to see, by all means, please ask me anytime. I'm always in the Mage Discord, especially in the Frost channel. You can drop me a comment below. You can hop in my Twitch stream. And if you're actually still watching, I love you. And you guys who enjoy this content are why I do what I do. So thank you very much. And I'll see you next time.